welcome to Fulhamish podcast. My name is Sammy James. Thank you for downloading this episode and your continued support for our weekly audio pit stop for irreverent Fulham discussion. Joining me on the podcast this week, Farrell Monk is here.
Good evening, Sammy.
Jack Collins is here.
Hello, everyone.
And we welcome back Ben Jarman. How you doing, mate?
Evening, mate. I'm very well.
Good to have you with us once again. And I'd like to think that if this podcast proves anything, and to be honest, it doesn't really prove very much, but the fact that we're never short for material just shows that supporting Fulham, life is never dull. So in the week, we recorded an important win over Barnsley on Saturday, and the Chris Martin Chrexit debate took a new twist. It was a dramatic U-turn, the likes of which Remainers could really only dream of, as Chris Martin committed his short-term future to Slav's team at the very least. We're going to discuss both those topics, plus we'll also examine the departure of Jozabed. Have I pronounced that all right?
Yep.
He's decided to leave freezing England for a 6-month stint on the Spanish coast at Celta Vigo, which I think sounds rather appealing. I wouldn't mind 6 months in the north of Spain.
Yeah, no, apparently there's a really nice octopus there, just on the border with Portugal.
Very
Which part of Spain, north or south?
I think it's in the north, north of Spain, northwest of Spain, I believe.
Northwest, yeah.
There was a heated discussion as to whether Vigo is in the north or south of Spain before this.
Its closest city is Porto, which obviously is in Portugal, and it's a very famous port town. And obviously the massive rivalry between Celta Vigo and Deportivo La Coruña as well.
But we're just going to confirm it's definitely in the north of Spain like I thought, not in the south of Spain like you thought.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Porto is near Porto.
Thank you.
Is really nice. It's a really nice white port in Porto.
My ego needed that. So let's discuss Saturday's win against Barnsley. Another really convincing performance from Slav's side. And it feels like the first time in years where we can go to Fulham matches expecting a good performance from the team. But it was a potential banana skin. Barnsley were 2 points above us in the table. But in the end, they were swept aside with considerable ease. Farrell, how big a win was that on Saturday?
Massively. We took apart a team who were gunning for a promotion. They're a good side. You know, we talked up Hurahan in the week, and he's on the radar of many big clubs out there, and we made him look ordinary. I didn't see a particularly good thing. He's a neat and tidy player, but they couldn't get the ball for more than five seconds, Barnsley. We absolutely raided them. Whenever they tried to get the ball forward, just wouldn't stick for them because we were just hassling them. And we had the ball forward so much, we had it in so many good positions, and we made a good team, a team that's in the top 10 of the table, look like a team who are bottom of the table. Absolutely dominating them for the full 90. There was a couple of points where they got close. There was the shot from Adam Hamill that hit the bar that seemed to come out of nowhere. I struggled to think of many more openings for them, and I can think of 20 openings for us just in probably the first half alone, even though there weren't that many sort of clear-cut chances.
Yeah, and Ben, back on the podcast. What did you think of Callas and Martin, who were back in the side? They make such a difference to this team.
I think Callas, definitely. Our defensive solidity just is second to none when we've got Callas back in there. I mean, the presence that he offers, and then that supreme confidence that communication will bring across a back four is something that Callas brings to the table well over a Madel or a Sigurdsson or a Ream can. It has actually made Ream look like quite a world beater since his return, and I think I've also been impressed with Ream as well. He had very good games against Ipswich and has had a couple of very strong home games since then. So he looks like he's really settled in the side, and I think that's down to just playing next to Callas, which seems strange because Callas is such a younger guy. For him to be schooling someone like Tim Ream, who's nearly 30 now, it shows how good he really is, and we should definitely push to get him permanently, even if it does cost us a fair bit. And then Martin, of course, just brings presence up front and that presence of mind to bring other people into play, and that is especially at the fore in the second goal. And I think, just the inclusion of those two brings us up another level. But not forgetting on your point, Farrell, like we did make Barnsley look a little bit terrible at times, and I completely agree with that. But they have been stripped of a couple of key players in the run-up to this game, like Sam Winnall and one other whose name escapes me right now. Jack? Who's the one that went to Sheffield Wednesday?
That's Sam Winnall that went to Sheffield Wednesday. But certainly, that was a big loss for them. It was quite a cagey first 45 minutes, I thought, Jack. Agreed with Farrell that we did create a lot of chances, but they had two good ones. There was the Hamill chance you mentioned, and Bradshaw missing quite an easy header from the free kick in the first half. Our goal and penalty came at the perfect time, though, right at the end of the first half.
Yeah, it really did. And I think that, we started really well. We had a really, really good opening 20, and we posted about it saying we've had a good opening 20. And as soon as we posted, pretty much it all went down the pan. And who actually looked really good for them was our old boy Ryan Williams in the 10, sort of floating about, and he was ghosting past players at points, and it was when he came to life that they really started to click up front. And yeah, the point that Farrell made was about Conor Hourihane and how his, sort of lack of game control stood up. And we said, our key battle here. I'll read out our key battle from preview. Barnsley's midfield general is highly rated by many experts around the country, with his recent form granting him an international call-up. However, if Kevin McDonald can stifle the Irishman's creative impetus, it will shut down the hub of Barnsley's attacking play and should curb their threat, which is pretty much spot on. I'm going to say so myself. It really was. The only time that they got into the game was you watched Conor Hourihane drift out wide, and it was when they got that free kick, and that chance that Tom Bradshaw missed was probably the best chance of the game, I thought, for Barnsley, and it came courtesy of wonderful set-piece delivery from Hourihane. And yeah, the Welshman should have done better up top with that. But apart from those two chances, and the handball chance did really come from nothing. Yeah, that it really was a one-way system. And I think that when the penalty went in, and as soon as we had control of the game, it only ever looked like going one way, and that's how it turned out.
If you want to read our previews, me and Jack write them before most Fulham games.
Most games, yeah.
You can read them on the fulhamish.co.uk website. I'm sure we'll have a special for the Queen's Park Rangers game on Saturday. It's basically who has time on a Thursday to write it between myself and Jack. So you mentioned the penalty. We finally scored a penalty. McDonald fouling McDonald. Did you think it was the right call? I thought it was a little bit soft at the time, but maybe looking back on the replays, it looked a little bit more justified. Hard to tell from the Hammersmith end.
I would say that looking back at it, because when you're at the game, you can't really spot all of what's going on in the penalty box for when a corner comes in. But looking back at the replays, I think we were lucky that the referee just happened to be looking directly at that when McDonald pulled McDonald back. It was soft, but it's a penalty at the end of the day. He pulled him back. Whether Kevin was actually going to get the ball, we don't actually know, but it's a penalty. He pulled him all the way back. People might actually say you can't give those because then you give 20 a game, but stop doing it then.
Well,
I
given
disagree.
the new FA rules,
I don't think
that's a penalty, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The new implications of FA rules this summer it came into play, states that you are manhandling anyone in the box and it is a penalty. And even there was a penalty in the first game of the season, I think, that involved Hull, when then one of the players was nowhere near the ball, was taken to the ground, and as such, there was a penalty awarded to Hull. So going by the law and the textbook, that should have been a penalty, and rightly so it was.
I'd have been gutted if that had been given against us. And I remember us saying against Norwich that it wasn't a penalty when Cameron Jerome was pulled down in the box by Scott Malone. And I think if that wasn't a penalty, then nor was it if someone had given that against us.
I'd be devastated because it's such silly defending.
Yeah, it is silly defending. Oh, don't get me wrong. Yeah, there's no need for it. But at the same time...
I'm not going anywhere when I play football.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have gone down. Don't get me wrong. I would have gone down as well. But... I would have been playing for it, so...
It's weird to try and analyse a penalty, but I'm going to try to. Chris Martin made it look easy. Is there any explanation, or is it just... It's finally the law of averages has worked out? It's only is that 2 penalties in 7 now this season, if I'm not correct?
Yeah, in all competitions.
I don't want to be devil's advocate here, but I didn't think it was that good a penalty. It just happened to go the other way to the keeper. I don't think that's any better or worse than quite a lot of the penalties we've missed.
Yeah.
I think he genuinely just stuck it bottom right, and if the keeper had gone the right way, the keeper probably would have got to it.
I remember Clint Dempsey was probably our worst successful penalty taker. All of his penalties used to be sort of easy height for the keeper, sort of, the goalkeeper could stretch out one hand and probably get it, but the keeper always seemed to dive the other way, apart from the one against Chelsea that time.
Which we'll never forgive him for.
Yeah. He didn't stop. He did that bloody run up.
For me, the big difference between that penalty there and the one he took against Rotherham, and then the ones we've missed since then, is just the fact that he put a lot of power on it, which is the big differentiator here. And the one call he put away in the cup, didn't put away in the cup, against Bristol, was terrible. It had no power on it, and this one just power in a good area. Luckily the keeper went the wrong way.
I was interested to find out, I know Farrell, you've done some research on this. I can only recall one penalty last season, which is Woodrow away against Rotherham. Now, we're only just into January and we've already had 7. Now, that could be down to what Ben has pointed out, slight tweak in the rules, and maybe referees in general are giving away more penalties. And I guess if anyone knows those stats, please do tweet us. But is that correct? We only had 1 last season?
We actually had 3
right.
last season.
Okay, what were the other ones?
We're not the most penalties this in the Championship.
Okay.
Reading had 10.
10?
And they've missed 5 of them.
Well, it's better than us.
50%.
I'd take 50
that.
Yeah. But we actually have had a really good penalties over the past few years. So before this season, I can't remember when the first one we missed this season, but before then, we had a 100% record last year. We had a 100% record, 12 in 12 the year before last.
We're 12, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, and then in the Premier League year, when we got relegated, we had 7 from 8, although the last one we missed, which was, from memory, I think it was Steve Sidwell against Spurs.
Yeah.
Which I was there at, and I was really gutted because I thought we were coming back into the game, and we got a penalty with about 10 minutes to go, and I thought, here we go, and it definitely was not go.
Nothing was go that season. But it's just interesting that we've got so many. I guess part of that is the tweak in the rules, or do you think that it's just generally more attacking play equals more penalties?
Yeah,
Probably both.
I'd go with that. Yeah, being more positive on the ball. We get into the box a lot more frequently this year than we definitely did last year, as you could tell by the amount of penalties we got last year. And our positivity throughout the pitch is obviously as a result of, firstly, in more goals, and then secondly in more chances created, and then naturally more penalties as well.
It's like that myth to do with United never getting penalties given away from them at home, but they're just such a good team at home that the ball hardly ever goes in the box for penalties to be given, really.
I've seen Fulham score a penalty at Old Trafford. Steve Malbranque in the FA Cup quarter-final.
I think that was the first penalty at Old Trafford against United for about 12 years or something ridiculous.
And Zat Knight smacked the bar from the halfway line.
I remember that.
And then I think Van Nistelrooy scored 2 in something like crazy 60 seconds. Moving on. So second half.
It's good to know that Brighton brace wasn't a new thing for the Fulham crowd. Oh, we've seen it all before. Good.
So second half, Fulham were scintillating once again, coining a phrase off of Jack. The Cottage Carousel in full swing. It seems like when Fulham are in front, it's so difficult for teams to get back in the game, Ben.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's just because we can really stifle teams when we keep possession so much when we go ahead, and the confidence we have to keep pressing it throughout the team and throughout different parts of the pitch. And we're very good, just recently picked this up as well in our style of play, and we're very good from switching from one flank to the other pretty quickly with a searching ball. I know that was apparently, according to the World Football Phone-In this week, that the switch was actually pioneered by Graham Taylor only a few years ago. Well, I say a few years ago, probably a couple of decades ago. But yeah, we're getting very good at switching play. We seem to keep it away. And then we had a point in the match that Fulham actually posted on their own channels today of a 53 pass sequence from back to front where we kept the ball for just over 2 minutes that led to a Steph Joe shot. Unfortunately, Steph Joe didn't have his best game at the weekend, so couldn't score that one. But yeah, 53 passes without the other team touching the ball for a total of 2 minutes, and that's why we can stifle teams when we get ahead. And also something I noticed that when we're out of possession, we're much better positionally now than we ever were at the start of the season. And a lot of people talk about Mourinho teams being very good positionally, and they were talking about that on Super Sunday this week, that out of possession Mourinho teams are very compact. They like to hold the ball, they like to work areas, and Fulham are actually pretty good at doing that, especially in the back 6 of our team, where in the front 5 or 6 or 4 will always push the ball. So I think that's why we're good. When we go ahead, we tend to stay ahead.
The only problem is that, which I found from Saturday, that although we did absolutely dominate Barnsley, don't get me wrong, that second half was an absolute walkover, was that there was just 1 or 2 times when we were pushing quite high to win the ball back, and it just left a huge gap in between our defence and midfield, which led to a couple of quarter chances, not even half chances for Barnsley to counter-attack, where Hamill was picking the ball up in between that area and had a chance to run at Ream.
Yeah. I think that's why that change in formation, i.e. bringing McDonald just the sole screener in front of that back four and just letting everyone else do a job has worked so well for us. And then what I think, like you said, we get caught a bit too far out of the pitch. But then as well, when we have possession, sometimes we try to play it out so much that we kind of muddle ourselves in the middle of the pitch. And then we can be susceptible to giving the ball away in quite dangerous areas. But again, like you play high-risk football and that's going to happen to you. But when we work it around so much, it's amazing to see and incredibly beautiful. But sometimes I wish we wouldn't get stuck in the middle of the pitch.
Even when we are in the middle of the pitch, it's just brilliant to see the absolute confidence in all of our players, in everyone else around that team.
Even
they
the
know,
centre-backs.
Yeah, I never seen so many 1 or 2 touch passes from 2 centre-backs, and even Button as well. Yeah. And that just sort of, just taking that half a second less or even a couple of seconds less to play a pass, just gave Barnsley no chance to even win the ball off us high up the pitch.
Completely agree with that. And then one thing I noticed also, just quickly, is that we're not using the channels 100% down the outside anymore, if you know what I mean. So if Fredericks is the fullback and he plays the ball inside to Piazon, for example, he doesn't always overlap on the outside. Now we're starting to see him coming into the inside channel, much like Dani Alves used to do for Barcelona with Messi, and then push to the byline. And I think that is becoming more and more crucial to us, because not only does it bring back their opposition winger, but it also means that their fullback is in a 2-on-1 situation and doesn't really know how to act. I
think that was one of the learning points from the Brighton game, because they noticed that Malone and Fredericks were trying to get to the byline and play balls from there. But Brighton did quite well at keeping that very compact and keeping that gap in between their fullback and their centre-back as tight as possible, so they couldn't find that channel, which meant a lot of our crosses came from a lot deeper, and it just didn't pay off for us that day.
Yeah. Wholly agree with that.
I did notice that Barnsley were very much trying to double up, partially on Malone, but especially on Ryan Fredericks. He nearly always had 2 men on him. Ryan Fredericks, personally, sometimes I wish he could be a tad greedier. There's a couple of times where I wish he goes for the shot, and he unselfishly nearly always goes for the cross. But I think there's been a couple of times this season, I think if he'd have just wrapped his foot around it with the outside of his foot, he could have found a couple in that bottom corner. He gets into the penalty box so much.
Yeah. He's often quite wide, and I think that's one of the things that, this underlapping fullback, as Pat Nevin once coined it, I believe, about Leighton Baines. They get into the area, and instead of being outside drilling balls in, they find themselves in this kind of sort of new, just inside the edge of the penalty box kind of position where you can shoot, although the angle's small. And I think that once he finds himself in that position more and more, there's going to have to end up being sort of a point where it says to him, look, Ryan, like, you're in that spot, have a go. Look at Malone. He's not afraid to have a go, and often it doesn't come off. But I think that Fredericks is twice the player Malone is, if I'm honest. And I think that if you look at the way that he can fizz a ball across the box, if you can actually get him looking at that for the far post, and even if no one then gets a touch, it's a deliciously attacking ball to drive that towards the far post, and it works even if no one gets a touch. Then it can come off the post and go in or anything like that. So I think that once we see Fredericks in that kind of underlapping role a little bit more, we'll get more out of him in that respect.
I would say that the amount of times that Fredericks did get to the byline of the weekend and tried to play a ball like a cutback, none of them seemed to work. We were getting some brilliant positions, and maybe if in the first 2 or 3 times he did have a shot that time, it might have made the covering defender think about what Fredericks is going to do next and open up the cutback, because 100% of the time they're always cut out. Well, I don't think we had a shot from a cutback.
We say this, but then we've scored so many goals from cutbacks this year. There's 3 alone that you can name as Aite against Rotherham, Steph Joe against Cardiff, and
2 against
Steph Joe against...
Well, effectively 2 against Cardiff as well, because although it came off the bar and Sessignon tapped it in.
And there was also Piazon's got one from a cutback, I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of goals going.
Well, Scott Malone's having shots. We saw that at the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure where that came from. Funny enough, I was saying this to Sammy earlier. Apart from the goal, I didn't think Scott Malone had that good a game.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
I think he was quite poor, in fact.
He was in the...
According to some of the stats, he was in that FPL team of the week, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he's in the EFL team of the week. So that's not just the Championship team of the week. That's also Championship, League One, and League Two. So it's quite a.
Have they just given him that for the goal? Like,
they must have done, because according to a few stats, he didn't complete a cross this week.
Yeah,
and only had a pass completion rate of about 60% or something.
It's like a Football Manager man of the
I'm not
match
sure.
where like one of your centre backs, you lose like it's like a draw 3-3 and one of your defenders scores a goal, man of the match.
Yeah, it was very odd. I didn't think that Malone, and while Malone offers an excellent attacking threat, I still don't massively rate him as a left back. I don't think he wins the ball very much as a left back.
In the first half, because he was close to me the whole game where I sit, he made 2 very good tackles that stick out in my memory.
Yeah,
maybe because it was just close to me.
Yeah.
I would say that I wouldn't say it was his best performance, but in comparison to the rest of the team, it probably wasn't as good as everyone else, I would say.
Yeah, it was just something I noticed because there was a lot of Malone chat going around, and I agree, it's a sublime finish. It's magical, but I just felt that it was his sort of only real contribution. If that's all I can sort of remember him doing for the whole game. But there were some magic moments on Saturday, and I really did. My favourite moment of the day was Steph Joe taking someone out with a Maradona turn. So their keeper, their player had the ball in the middle. I think it was Josh Scowen, who had one of the worst days of his life. Him and AD White must have literally left Fulham
White.
just thinking,
AD
well,
White
I mean,
should
what's
retire
wrong
after
with
that.
me? Like, I mean, he must just be like, oh, what's going on? It was after AD White, Aluko mugged him twice in the first 3 minutes, and it was like, well, you're going to have an awful day at the office here, son, aren't you? But it was Scowen, and he'd won the ball back, and he was going over to take it, and it was the first good thing he'd done all game. And the ball went a little bit far, and Steph Joe sort of Maradona'd, and as he did, he wiped him into the boards, and it was like, you're really not having a good day at the office, are you, Josh?
Do you
Poor
think they're
fella.
there at home, like in a chair, just shaking on a Saturday evening? It's like, oh my God.
I think Jonathan Abita's still got PTSD from when he came to the Cottage.
He got mugged off so hard.
But it was an exceptional goal from Scott Malone, who said to BBC London after the match he didn't know what to do when celebrating the goal. He said he just shut his eyes and it went in. But it's his 3rd of the season now. He's getting a little bit of a knack, and he loves playing against Barnsley.
Yeah, he does. But honestly, what a finish that is, to like come in at that speed and still get your knee over the top of the ball so it doesn't end up in row Z, and for it to be directed into the bottom corner is a fantastic finish.
And I actually sit in row Z, so that would have been me.
You could have headed it back to it.
It's in the
You've
side
probably been
netting
hit
as
with
well.
a
It's
couple of
not,
Luco shots, right?
Yeah. It's like,
it's not, anywhere. It's in the side netting, fully like wrapped around the post, kind of, a brilliant. It's just an unbelievable finish.
and an unbelievable pick out from Chris Martin.
And also,
from those
everyone was
goals.
like, literally before it landed, everyone was like, what is he doing? And literally, the bloke behind me said, he was like, what's he up to? And then Malone hit it. And it was like, that's what he's up to.
So that win took Fulham to 8th in the Championship. Norwich lost to Rotherham, so we climbed above them, and we climbed above Barnsley, who are only 2 points above us at the start of the day. So we're just behind Derby, and then there's a few points up to the playoff places. Some interesting results in the Championship at the weekend. The most interesting potentially coming on Thursday night, which obviously was the Queen's Park Rangers win against Reading. Notable for 2 reasons. One, because obviously Reading are just a few places above us and starting to look really like they could go on a bit of a slide. And I think have we mentioned on the podcast that Reading have been quite overachieving this season, especially when you look at the statistics.
Yep.
It's quite surprising.
They do have quite an ageing squad, so I would say that. I mean, they've got
37-year-old Gareth McCleary, right?
What a man.
58-year-old Paul McShane.
Don't sell McShane.
But also interesting because Queen's Park Rangers now with 3 on the bounce as they go into the Fulham game. We'll discuss that in a second, but I mean, Leeds are starting to look like a bit of a force. Good win for them on Friday night. I spoke to a Leeds fan on Saturday. They're aiming for the top 2. They genuinely think they can trouble Newcastle and Brighton. And after Brighton lost their big unbeaten run at the weekend, you could hardly blame them for getting a little bit overexcited.
Yeah, and also they've sort of come from nowhere. And we were saying, I remember saying right at the beginning of this when we were looking at the teams above us, going, we're better than Leeds. And because you looked at that performance at Elland Road, and they were not diabolical but poor. They didn't really offer much up front. They seemed a bit shaky at the back. And much as they sing about Pontus Jansson being magic, he has done wonders in their defence. He has really proved himself to be a Premier League player. And I suppose that, what Leeds fans will be worried about is if that they don't go up. I mean, he's going to be going up one way or the other. But at this rate, he looks like he could be going up in a Leeds shirt.
Well,
So
they do have an option to sign him permanently, which looks like they're going to take up.
I
But
thought
yeah,
they
he
might have
could-
activated it already, but I mean, surely someone's going to pop in and usurp that because, he looks a cut above. He looks, Callas-esque in some of the things he does. But also they've taken a bit of the pressure off Chris Wood, who obviously did really well for Leicester that season that they got promoted. And I think he's a really good player, Chris Wood. He has quite a lot of options in his arsenal. But Kamar Roof started living up to his potential a little bit, and it's taken a bit of the pressure off Wood.
The roof is finally on fire.
The roof is finally on fire. But it's taken a bit of the pressure off Chris Wood, and now Chris Wood looked like he's enjoying his football again instead of sort of bearing the whole weight of the club on his shoulders. And yeah, Leeds look like a really, really impressive unit again.
Do you think it's likely that Reading and Huddersfield could be the sides to slide out of the playoffs if any of them are? Because Sheffield Wednesday and Leeds look strong, and if Fulham are going to break into the playoffs, and a lot of fans do seem confident that is a strong possibility, and you imagine Derby must still be gunning for it despite a couple of poor results. Two sides are going to have to drop out.
Perhaps this is quite the easy answer to make, but in terms of, especially with regards to Huddersfield and potentially with Reading, you sort of look at their squad depth and you think, have they got enough to sustain a long run? Have you got that quality and depth, especially with those two guys? But also, just quickly going back to Leeds, if you're Hugh Jennings, who's chairman of Swansea, and you sat there thinking, have I made the wrong decision by sacking Gary Monk just over a year ago? Is it a year ago? Just over a year and a half ago.
It was just before Kit.
Who's revitalised Leeds and looks like he's going to take them back to the Premier League, and then you're languishing 4 managers later at the foot of the Premier League table with someone you're not got a whole lot of confidence in, although Clement is a good manager.
The funny thing about Gary Monk is it seemed like a coup for Leeds to attract someone like Gary Monk, but he was still only a manager with
one club.
One
club.
club.
No real record.
And
yeah.
a season and a half's
Like,
experience.
he's not got that much experience as a manager. It just happens to be his experience was for a very respected footballing side in the Premier League.
He got quite a lot of publicity after the start of his Swansea tenure because he was, obviously a really good young British manager, I suppose. And he got a lot of, Gary Monk's going to be the next England manager. And there was a lot of that after he won. I think he won 2 Man of the Months in about 4 or something like that. And he did do really well. And I think back in the day, I wrote an article about Kit Simons and Gary Monk and how using a homegrown manager with the club's best interests at heart could have had a positive effect on the club. And it was pretty much as I wrote that article, Swansea started a slide and Gary Monk got sacked. And then about 4 weeks later, Fulham started a slide and Simons got sacked. And it was one of those where it all sort of went so well for a little while. It was all very fairy tale. And then it just sort of dropped out. But I think Gary Monk didn't necessarily get a fair crack of the whip at Swansea.
So next up for Fulham is Queen's Park Rangers, the derby on Saturday, 12:30 kickoff UK time. It's on the telly over here on Sky Sports. So if you're listening to this overseas, I imagine there'll be a good stream for you to watch. I know a lot of people managed to watch the Barnsley game on Saturday because it was on telly in somewhere in Scandinavia, I believe. So
And in America as well.
Yeah,
Really?
So I think quite a lot of people were able to watch the
Joe
Fulham
Franklin.
Barnsley game on Saturday, and you'll be able to watch the Rangers game this Saturday as well. Typically, as I just mentioned, we seem to be playing them as they've hit form after being pretty much terrible ever since they recruited Ian Holloway.
They weren't very good against Reading. I know they won, but actually watching the game, they were quite poor. And Reading should have buried them, to be honest. And it was, it's obviously a little bit worrying that Reading play a little bit like us in terms of they like to dominate possession and try and carve chances through like intricate passing play, and they couldn't break down QPR. So then maybe that's a slight cause for concern. But actually, apart from the goal, QPR didn't create very much, and they weren't. And also, even the goal, I'm not sure they mean to do that. I don't know if you've seen the
I haven't
goal.
actually.
It's quite a good ball. It comes back from the fullback, and a player, instead of shooting, sort of drills the ball behind the centre back, and Mackie just taps it in. It's almost like an inch perfect cross, but I'm almost 100% sure that he's not trying to do that. Like, I'm pretty sure he's shooting and has just scuffed it, and it's just fallen in the right place. But I think that QPR are there for the taking at the weekend, and we need to be putting that to bed.
And then not only, they have won 3 league games in a row, but they did have a pretty terrible loss against Blackburn in the Cup only 7 days ago. So, and then their other 2 wins were against Wolves and Ipswich. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm getting a bit carried away with QPR's form.
Yeah, I think you potentially could do. I mean, when we played Ipswich, they were diabolical. Let's put it nicely. But yeah, I've watched QPR a couple of times this season, mainly on the TV, and obviously TV doesn't give you a full picture of how the game went.
Sky are going to launch their own QPR channel soon, aren't they?
Probably.
Sky Sports QPR, one of those pop-up ones.
Yeah, Tony Cascarino. Is the front man.
Cast.
Apparently, he wrote his missus a card that says "Best wishes" from Tony Cascarino when she gave birth to their daughter, because he was signing autographs before he came to the office. Anyway, before he went to the hospital. Sorry. Anyway. I agree with Jack that QPR don't really make a whole lot of chances. One thing we have to be very careful about is that, yes, it's an Ian Holloway team and they will play blood, guts and thunder football. They'll try and nibble us wherever they can. And I don't think that the quality is there for them to get past our K-Max screen and the two centre-halves. Hopefully it's Callas and one other. But I think we can take them, definitely, and it would hurt me very much if we left there without 3 points.
Yeah. I think the problem is that it doesn't really matter how well we played, as we saw from the last game against QPR. We can literally dominate them start to finish, and it could go wrong.
But going back to that the initial QPR game, looking back at it, it was a type of game that Ian Holloway would have loved at the time. But all QPR had were just aimless shots from God knows where. It was one of those ones we cast our mind backs. How did we come away losing that game after having 2 penalties as well for a start? I know. Anyway, sorry.
Again.
Scrap that, Sammy. It never happened. It never happened. Edit that one out.
It will be interesting, though, to see how this team cope in what's going to be quite a high-pressure atmosphere at Loftus Road. I imagine their fans are going to be up for it after winning 3 in a row. Obviously, Loftus Road is not an easy stadium to visit. The fans are right on top of you. It's a very compact, small shithole that's difficult to visit.
I mean, I hate QPR more than anyone, but you can say something for their stadium, which is at least it's not Griffin Park.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, and it's one of those where I think that what we really need to respect on the weekend is we need a strong referee. We really do, because you can see players like Kenny and Johansson getting absolutely kicked to shreds, and I think that if QPR tend to get away, if they get away with that at home in front of their home crowds, it's gonna rile everyone up. It's gonna get the crowd working behind them, because it's obviously going to be thunder and blood and all the things that Holloway loves. And I think that we need to stray away from that, because that doesn't suit us. We're not good at that. We don't need to do that, because we're a better footballing team than they are, and we need to play our game, keep possession, win the ball, frustrate the fans, make sure that they've got nothing to cheer about, keep the ball and sort of just wear them down until the point where someone does something stupid.
Yeah.
They lose a man, they lose their heads, bam.
There's one player that's come back recently, who I'm actually a big fan of, but he's been there for quite a while now, is Jamie Mackey.
Yeah,
he's a brilliant player. I when they got relegated the first time, when they had this superstar squad, but their standout player was Jamie Mackey, who'd been there for quite a few years.
We were linked with him that summer.
I was desperate. I was absolutely desperate for Fulham to get him, because I thought he's so direct. He knows where the goal is. He's kind of got a James Milner about him, that he does a lot for the team, but it's not just scoring goals. He creates a lot of chances.
He's a very honest, hard-working kind of player who doesn't deserve to be loved by a club like QPR.
So, news broke on Friday that Chris Martin was back and available for selection against Barnsley. Caught me off the hop, to be honest, and we've had a couple of chats on this podcast the last couple of episodes, pretty much resigned to the fact that Chris Martin wouldn't be playing for the club again. Although we did speak last week about how Derby had signed David Nugent for £2.5 million, and that we thought that why would Derby still want Chris Martin back if they've just spent £2.5 million on a new striker? Although they were looking desperately short of firepower on Friday against Leeds. They probably could have done with Chris Martin. So it was announced that he'd be back available for selection against Barnsley. He was then picked. Slav said before the game, we've resolved this situation inside the dressing room, and he's committed 100% with us. We believe in him, and the team believes in him too. Now, after the game, he said, I don't know why people ask me about Chris Martin so much. This is not his first game for Fulham. He did not refuse to play for us. He is a professional football player. He was a little bit confused with the situation, and now he has a clear mind.
Well, now we're a bit confused with the situation.
But
Thanks, Slav.
If Slav said he did not refuse to play, then why come out with the whole "We are not a train station" after the Reading game, where, unless it was something lost in translation, he seemed pretty angry with what was going on. But then, I don't know.
Unless the whole thing is, Chris Martin said to Slav, "I'm not sure what's going on. I've heard these things from McLaren. I'd be interested in hearing what both things have to say." And Slav's gone, "No, you're not playing. This is not a train station. You're not playing." And then when people asked him about it, that's got, sort of twisted a little bit, and to say that, oh, he's saying this, when maybe it was just a question of, he said, "Look, what are the options?" And Slavis has gone, "Well, that means he's not got his head in the right place, so we need to get sure his head's in the right place before he plays again." And, that's not impossible or unreasonable from either party, in fact.
So you reckon that it wasn't Chris Martin's decision to not play?
Oh, I know
you can't know, but then
I'm suggesting things that might have happened.
Yeah.
I think there's more to it than all of us know. I think the only kind of thing that I can imagine, and Chris Martin is not a player for stirring up dressing rooms by all accounts, in terms of he's never had that kind of reputation around him. There was a bit of he was sort of the dressing room leader at Derby when there was a bit of chat about him not necessarily getting on with the Clement regime, but there's speculation that there's more to that than Chris Martin and Paul Clement might wish to, or care to admit. So, we're not going to delve into that. But I think there's obviously some sort of personal issues in here that mean that the club aren't, or the player isn't going to come out and say things. And if he's willing to, play again on the weekend, I think that there must be something more to it, because I don't think you do that. I think you either stick to one gun or the other.
From a footballer's point of view, if you have a problem, who do you talk to?
Your agent.
You talk to... Yeah, I was going to say, do you talk to your agent?
100%.
Okay, and then who does the agent talk to? Do they talk to the manager, or is there someone else? Is there like a player liaison potentially
Ideally,
between them and the manager?
Yeah, so every single club, regardless of what tier they're in, has a player liaison agent who will probably talk directly to the player, who will help them from anything from setting up electricity in their house to getting them some new boots to helping them with the correct mortgage from their house. And then they will also talk to the board of directors. This is the player agent. The player will probably almost never have a conversation directly with a board of directors and or the manager, unless it's at a point where a big decision needs to be made. Now, I think I can see where Jack's coming from. I've read a couple of reports, I think it was across the course of today and maybe over the weekend, that there was some agent discussions here that apparently Martin is currently on 17k a week and was looking for a substantial rise to 25 to 28. And that was where the confusion was, because apparently Derby were willing to pay that and give him a new terms of contract, whereas Fulham were like, we're not going to pay this. Now, I don't know if there's been some sort of go-between, in which case we agreed to sign him permanently, which I believe we have the option for. And then next summer give him a contract that's like 21 or 22k, in which case he'd probably become one of our top earners, or whether it's been agreed that he will see out the rest of the season here at Fulham and then he'll go back to Derby and earn 25k, regardless of what league they're in. I don't know what's happened. It seems like the solutions happened behind closed doors, and now Martin's happy, we're happy, and it's all systems go again.
So it's potentially the answer that the reason Slav made those comments at the Reading game, because Slav was in the dark as well, because potentially this was being discussed at levels of Fulham higher than him. He is just the head coach. We have to remember that. He's not actually the manager, as say. He is only in charge of team affairs, so maybe that's why Slav's comments were taken thus. But you're surprised that Fulham would have published them if it was the case that the whole club didn't think it. I just find the whole situation bizarre.
That part is, for me, just basically stands out as Slav, and probably with the backing of the board, trying to make a statement on behalf of the club. Because there would be times, possibly in the past, where we would have said, OK, he wants to go, let's just let him go, or, we'll try and make him rot in the reserves and it will never come to fruition. But now I'm so glad, and we said this in a couple of podcasts ago, that we've had this stance where Fulham have become very strong, Slav's been very strong, and the board of directors have sat there and clearly said, we're not a walkover. Even though he's one of our biggest players, if he doesn't want to play for us, fuck him off for a bit and then see how the situation goes. So I think we've obviously published those, and Slav would have been told by the board of directors anyway, as with any football manager of a big player, this is the situation. So, yeah, I'm glad we've made a statement. I'm also very glad he's back.
Yeah, I'm very glad he's back. He was excellent.
He was.
Really
he looked
good.
so fresh, absolutely fresh at the weekend. And just, although we have been playing well without him in the team for those 2 games, but with him in the team, he was pretty unplayable at times at the weekend.
That diagonal ball that he chested down, and it was a good stop in the first half, was an absolute gem of a touch.
It was just that tiny little bit of movement that all he needed. Because he's obviously not the fastest player in the world. He's probably not faster than the 2 Barnsley centre-backs. But that tiny bit of anticipation, that tiny bit of movement, and it was a great ball from Malone to find him.
No, there you are. Something Malone did.
There you
Good,
go.
yeah.
I really liked, for the build-up of the second goal, obviously the cross basically takes precedent there because it was a great cross. But there's 2 stages to that goal. First is that he flicks it onto Aluko and he finds him, which is something that in the previous 3 matches where he wasn't playing, we couldn't get a hold of the ball. And then secondly, to make the movement to allow himself to get into space for that cross, and then to have the awareness to realise that he was not completely isolated but didn't have the people around him to make an effect, just to stop the ball and drag those centre-backs straight past him and then loft it in. It's just like that guile we needed up top.
Yeah. In previous years, a person would have played up front, whether it be Dembele, Woodrow, McCormack, whoever. But I reckon a different striker in that position, and it has happened in previous years, that they would make that little bit of space, but then they take way too long to actually play a pass after that. All it took was Martin receiving that ball. He then sort of dragged it back away from the defender. One look up, bang, across. A few seconds, that was it.
We play so quickly now that's why I think that Ross McCormack wouldn't work in this situation, because he likes to have too much time on the ball, whereas Martin works because he knows what he's doing before he gets it and knows how to execute it. And I watched Ross against Wolves at the weekend. It wasn't his best performance by a long way.
Absolute shocker, by all accounts. I have one reservation about Chris Martin, and that's what happens if we come up against Derby County in a playoff final.
We
need to draft
play him
someone.
in disguise.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones. Like,
We let him wear a Corley Woodrow mask.
I think it's just one of those ones where we're saying all these things, and it's so good to have him back. And he made such a difference. He really did. And I thought we would, we looked so sharp in attack, and we looked like we had so many sort of options. And it's just really starting to get to me that I think this is just one of those things.
That Venezuelan striker with the ginger hair looks just like Chris Martin.
Where did they get him from? We just signed Hugo Rodiega on a 1-day deal.
It's Blue Monday today, and I wasn't really feeling it until that comment. So cheers for ruining my Monday, mate.
Yeah, it's
I really appreciate that. Like, I'd written in my notes, like, we're just getting to the edge of the playoffs. Like, we're heating up at the right time. We're really strategically placed as dark horses to jump in there at the last. We're doing a Green Bay Packers and getting hot when it needs to be hot, and now you fucked it.
I'm really worried.
Cheers,
like,
mate.
Seriously
Who will
worried
Chris
about it.
Martin root for?
Us, obviously.
Well,
Until he dies, mate.
Yeah.
Never the badge.
Never in doubt.
Did anyone see Ryan Fredericks' tweet?
Called him
Yes,
a snake.
yeah.
I love that.
That was amusing. But also, someone pointed this out to me at the time, and it was one of those things when Chris Martin scored. Pretty much like the entirety of the squad were over to him. Everyone came over, and that doesn't strike me as the response of a team to a man that's just gone out on strike on them.
Yeah.
I don't think he has.
Yeah.
No, I know, but that's what I mean. It's one of those things when people are saying
agreeing with your point.
that doesn't much as they're making jokes and whatever about it, and that's obviously part of it as well. If Fredericks feels comfortable enough to be like, well, he is obviously one thing, but like to see them all respond to him like that is obviously positive, and obviously shows that he's part of sort of a team and a unit. So, that's good.
Other news that broke on Friday was Jozabed leaving. He was joining Celta Vigo on a 6-month loan, only 6 months after his £4 million move from Rayo Vallecano.
Rayo Vallecano.
Rayo Vallecano.
Double L's are pronounced as a Y.
Okay, Rayo Vallecano. Okay. Now, Ben wrote a brilliant article on Friday, which was called Adios Jozabed.
For now,
And
at least.
it was very much a what might have been article for Jozabed. I think we were all very excited when he joined. That's big money for a championship side to spend. Reported £4 million. We've spoken at length last season how he scored both against Real Madrid and Barcelona and was a standout player for Vallecano as they got relegated to, is it Serie B? No,
It's called
Liga Segunda.
It's called La Liga 123 now because it's sponsored by Santander and their 123 account.
That's the most confusing thing.
Very, very weird trivia. But yeah, that's why.
even Spain has sold its soul to
Unfortunately
to
so.
the
The first one
corporates.
called La Liga Santander.
It's called La
and the
Liga
other one's called
Santander,
La Liga 123.
Yeah, the Liga Santander 123 account.
Goodness me.
What division are you in? 1, 2, and 3?
It's weird. It's even more strange because past La Segunda, you've got all the regional divisions, so like 2A, 2B, 3A, B, and C. So you don't know what league you're in, basically.
But Ben, the main point from your article was just how he is a good player just at the wrong time for Fulham. That was the crux of your article, but maybe go in a bit more in depth for those that haven't read it yet.
Well, yeah. So for me, I think I'm a little bit biased, but Jozabed, over the past sort of 12 to 18 months before his move to Fulham, had been a vital cog in the Rayo Vallecano system that is essentially run by what is known in the Spanish world as probably a bit of a nutcase manager in Paco Gemes, who used to play centre defensive midfielders as centre-backs and stuff like that. And he really shone in a system that allowed Vallecano to play out of the back, even though they weren't particularly good at it. And him and Roberto Trachoras in the centre midfield had a really silky, smooth partnership. It would be Jozabed would assist the players and get the ball out wide for their wingers, whereas Trachoras would do all the dirty work on behalf of Jozabed. And then, unfortunately, last season, Vallecano, despite all their promising early season form, sort of transcended into a really bad slide where they couldn't get any goals and they were letting in a lot at the other end. And unfortunately, it led to them being relegated on their last day in somewhat unfortunate circumstances. But yeah, and then the move here, apparently he was on the verge of signing for Sevilla, who defeated Real Madrid at the weekend and their 40-game unbeaten run. Sevilla, obviously 3 times champions of the Europa League in a row, qualified for the Champions League this year. And obviously when we signed him, it felt like a bit of a coup for the club. There was some initial nerves in the fact that we feel like we'd really got ourselves a player here. And obviously based on his form last year, I was very excited and I thought he could make a real difference to the team. Not only because of his quality and the fact that he could play more than one position, but obviously when we saw him take to the field in a couple of the Championship games, he did look like the physicality, the speed, and that those elements of the game really took him by surprise. And the shock, obviously, of being in Madrid, which is a completely different culture to London, obviously does make a difference, not being able to speak language as well. But he's a great player. He feels like more of a Premier League player because he doesn't want the harem-scarum sort of end-to-endness of the Championship. He would prefer the structured, sort of free-flowing football of the Prem, because La Liga's highly tactical and you get a lot of space, or not a lot of space, you get a lot of time, but not a lot of space. And it's up to him to create that space, which is very similar to the Prem, which is why I believe that at the time we signed such a good player, but the way we're playing now, too fast for him, too physical, and that's why slightly wrong place, wrong time.
Do you think there's a possibility in a dreamland that if Fulham got promoted,
Yeah.
that Jozabed could return to Fulham and have a key part to play as a Premier League player? Which sounds crazy that we'd loan out someone because now we don't trust you for the Championship, but as soon as we've reached the promised land, then we'll get you.
There are a couple of players that I think have done it in the past. Obviously, none spring to mind right now, but the way I see it is that should we be promoted, I think a good comparison, although maybe not the same calibre of player, would be to someone like potentially Gaston Ramirez at Middlesbrough, who's obviously their creative hub. Isn't the fastest player, although his goal the other week was breathtaking. But I think Jozabed could offer that incision, that incisiveness, that playmaking ability that we could have in the Premier League, given the more afforded space that you get given in that league.
Would you
It's
say
more
he's-
statically?
Is he as good as Brian Ruiz? Because he was a phenomenal footballer.
Well, when we first talked about him and his first couple of games and the Middlesbrough game in the Cup, where we were obviously blessed to be christened with that no-touch turn, the Jozabed, I think we called it the Jozabed turn, potentially,
feint.
the Jozabed feint, where he lets the ball run across his body to give himself some space. I think that's the sort of thing we would see. And Ruiz had the same sort of thing, that languid style that makes him look so relaxed on the ball, and it makes him look like he's not trying, when in fact, like, he is trying. It's just his way of expressing himself, and it's a very Spanish and very like continental way to play. It doesn't always have to be blood and thunder.
So intelligent. The way he'd have like 4 players around him, and he'd still be able to just pick a pass, and the pass just wouldn't be luck. It would just be forceful, precise,
Yeah.
and I think that's such a talent. It was beautiful to watch at times.
I
You know,
think
things weren't going right for us.
Yeah.
It's easy to point fingers, but I loved watching him play.
Yeah, there are definitely some comparisons between the two players. I 100% agree with that.
We were blessed to watch Ruiz.
For me, it was.
We were blessed.
I believe so. I completely agree with you. I think that at points we saw things that were, nothing short of magical. That chip against Everton stands out as just one of the most technically brilliant goals I've ever seen. And just some of the things he did with the football, you'd be like, oh, it's just, unbelievable. But he was lazy, and Dave from H3 didn't think he was very good.
Right, so we've come to the end of the podcast. If you want to read more about Jozabed and Ben's thoughts on Jozabed, please go to fulhamish.co.uk. It will be the second article down called Adios Jozabed, or at least for now. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
It's a great article. I read it
Very,
earlier.
very good.
Thank you.
Very much worth a read. So it has come to the end of the podcast, and it is time once again for Secretary Jack to name this episode. What are you going for, please, Jack?
I think on another one from you, Sammy, that's 2 in a row. I'm going to go for the Cottage Carousel.
Okay.
After the magic of the fair that we saw on Saturday.
The Cottage
The
Carousel.
Cottage Carousel.
Wow, what an honour. 2 in a row
I
from
know,
Jack.
you're doing well.
You guys need to up your game.
Yeah.
My submission was going to be, is Celta Vigo in the north of Spain?
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back next Monday with another podcast looking back at the West London derby between Queen's Park Rangers and Fulham. Going to be a good one. If you're off to the game, enjoy it. If you're watching it on the telly, then we hope you get 3 points watching at home.
Keep an eye out for us. Lower tier, the boys.
Lower tier.
Oh,
gang.
yeah, lower
Lower
tier.
tier gang.
We're aiming for the telly. Should we bring a flag or something? Should we bring a Fulhamish flag?
We should make a Fulhamish flag.
Okay, well, we'll do some arts and crafts in the week, and we'll post it on Twitter if we get round to it.
Good.
So thank you once again for listening. Please go and share the podcast with anyone that you think will enjoy it. Farrell, Ben and Jack, we'll see you next week.
See you
Adios.
very much.
6 months, 6 months in northern Spain.
Vigo's in the south of Spain.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
on the
it's
next-
border
it's on
of
the border of
Portugal.
It's really lovely.
What?
Can
Apparently
I?
they do
yeah.
really nice octopus there.
They do. It's a very big port town there.
Yeah.
I googled where Vigo was, and it's north of Portugal.
Yeah.
Yeah, therefore in the south of Spain. It's in Galicia.
What?
Yeah.
I'm really
I've
confused.
been. Yeah.
I'm really confused by
Porto,
this. I
yeah.
thought it was in like the north.
Its closest city is Porto.
Yeah. Which is really nice.
So that's not making it. Doesn't that make it in the north of Spain?
No,
I think
no,
we
I
should.
think maybe it's in the
I think
middle.
we should send you on a 6-month loan to the Vigo Celta Vigo
Yeah.
podcast.
I still
so you
think
can
I'm
learn
right.
all about it.
Just what's going on?
It's in the north of Spain.
It's in the north of Spain.
I told you it was in the north of flipping Spain. Are you trying to wind me up?
Yeah, you're right.
I shouldn't have gone with the crowd, even though I've been there.